This is the Infinity Warp prototype. Between 2005 and 2009 or so, there were discussions on the Infinity forums about how to handle spaceship movement in a full-size solar system where ships could seamlessly move between interstellar space and right down to the surface of a planet. In 2009, we were having a little bit of difficulty understanding how ships could possibly interact together while still on the move. That is, when ships came together in interplanetary space, did they have to stop, or was it possible for them to continue to interact while on the move, such as flying in close fleet formations and things like that? This prototype was created in order to explore the possibility that they could, in fact, interact while on the move. What we're looking at is a very simple display. It's obviously 2D. This is the player's ship. This is a nearby space station. This circle here with 1 kilometer on it is called a range ring, and there are a whole variety of range rings that are used to keep a sense of scale, because what we're looking at is a 2D display of not only a close-up of the ship, but we can also back off to the point where we see planet Earth, the entire solar system, and indeed even we can go out to the point of seeing stars and an entire galaxy beyond. Those are not all the stars in the galaxies. Those are just the ones that quote unquote the ship's sensors can see. So if we zoom back in again on this space station with our ship, we find that WASD controls will move the ship around pretty much the way you would expect in any sort of 2D spaceship game. And that's thoroughly intentional. We want the player to be very comfortable with the style of movement. This is intended for 3D play, so just imagine your typical 3D controls for moving a spaceship around in 3D space. It's intended to convey a sense of very Newtonian motion. The difference with this system is that the ship is not controlled by rockets. What's happening is, and it's indicated by the lower left display over here, is a power level or a speed setting. That's all this gray ring is indicating. We're not moving very fast right now, but as I accelerate, as I increase my speed, I should say, you'll see that the power setting goes up, and then it'll go down again as I drop my speed. And if I zoom out a little, and the speed remains constant even though the power is up. And that's because that's all I'm doing. The power translates directly to a speed value. Because I'm in close proximity to the space station, the maximum speed that I can achieve in this ship is only about 3 kilometers per second. And I can't really demonstrate the full 3 kilometers per second because there's a proximity system involved. If I get away from the space station, that is, I lose proximity, start to lose proximity with the space station, my speed will increase even if I don't increase my power setting. So that's what I'm going to do right now is I've selected a power setting and I won't touch the power controls anymore. And I'll click on the space station and get some additional information up. You can see that my speed is constant, but as soon as I reach the 10-kilometer point, my ship started racing away from the space station. And I'm not playing with the power level at all. It's just the fact that my proximity to the space station is changing, and therefore my speed is increasing. Now, I can actually very easily stop this. And you can see I'm reducing my power level, and that reduces my speed. But the granularity of control that I have now is greatly reduced. You can see I'm still pretty much moving in a Newtonian fashion, but my speed is changing hugely. I'm changing by hundreds of kilometers per second very easily. Whereas when I was back in close proximity to the space station, I could only move a few meters or tens of meters per second, which is exactly what we want. There is nothing to interact with here, so I want very coarse movement controls. And when I'm close to something, I want very fine movement controls. And I'll try and get back to the space station because there's an NPC ship that's closing in on that space station. Oop, and it's already arrived and left. So as I get back to the space station, my speed automatically drops down. and it will never be more than 3 kilometers per second. With such a low power setting on my ship, I'm down around 10% power. I should be around 3 kilometers, about 300 meters per second when I actually get within. And there we go. So around 438 meters per second is the speed I've got, and then I can just move in a completely Newtonian fashion. And that's that's a close range approach to another object. And we'll lose that selection so that we can just see everything a little more clearly. Now, if I want to go off to Earth, I have to go find out where it is because everything's orbiting and whatnot. So I've got the Earth over here, and it tells me that I am moving at 3 kilometers per second relative to that. But that's only because that's how fast the space station likely is moving. So I rocket away from the space station. You think, oh my goodness, I'm going to crash into the Earth, but not going to, because once I get in proximity to the Earth and a low Earth orbiting space station, I automatically slow down. So I'm not playing chicken with the Earth here. And as I approach, my speed continues to drop. And because this is a fairly maneuverable ship, I can brake pretty much at the last minute. I have a fair amount of velocity to shed, so I'll shed some of it now so I don't smack the planet. And we're just making an approach. Ignore the terrain that was intended as an early mining system prototype. So that's just been left in there. And there we are, stopped in a certain height above the planet. Now you'll notice that my velocity up here is slowly changing, and that's because gravity is in force. And if you stop a ship and don't actually apply any thrust, the gravity of the nearby bodies will influence you and pull you down. So if you get close to the sun or Jupiter or a massy body like that, you will get into trouble because your engines will not be able to overcome the gravity. Remember that the engines are limited by proximity to other bodies, to things you want to interact with. So if you can only summon up 3 kilometers per second in velocity, and the acceleration of gravity of a nearby body is greater than that, you will be pulled in. And now I'm at about 40% power, and my speed is going to increase once I get away from the planet. And I can go rocketing off and go find another destination. Now this time we'll go interplanetary. And it's tempting to increase the power, but as your proximity fades, you'll start to pick up power. Start to pick up speed automatically. To give a sense of how the proximity affects how it disrupts the engine's drive, we can bring up a display that shows the intensity of the disruption field around each of the bodies. So here's the moon over here with a smaller disruption field around it, and here's the Earth. And if we zoom out, we can see that the sun has the largest, and that's done more for variety than anything else, because we want the larger bodies to be easier to approach and the smaller bodies to be a little more challenging, such as an asteroid or something like that out in the middle of nowhere. The space station and the moon are easy to get to because of the proximity of the Earth. The Earth generally stabilizes that entire system. Now, if I go out here in the middle of nowhere, if I bring up so I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I'm absolutely undisrupted right now, and I can go as fast as I care to, which is up to 0.1 AU per second, which is something like 50 times the speed of light. So we're clearly not worried about relativity and things like that. So here's an asteroid called Lutetia, and Lutetia is a very small body. So I'm going to set up some serious speed on my way to Lutetia, because we've actually got to continuously go there. We never just target an object and say, boop, we're there. We always have to drive over. And the idea is that ships will be in interplanetary space when they're moving around a star system, a planetary system. And that means that other ships can chase them down, interact with them, join up with them, break off with them, whatever you might want to do. But the point is that interactions will happen in interplanetary space. And I'll get into some of that in another video when we actually try and track down some of these other ships. Right now, I just want to show how we're going to approach a small body, which can be much more touchy. And I have to carefully use the side thrusting. What I'm trying to do is keep this line here, along the center line, and I am coming in way too fast. Keeping it lined up with Lutetia so that I get the full disruption of Lutetia. And I'm braking hard here. I guess I'm not going to overshoot this time. I'm braking real hard. I'm dropping the power on my drive and relying on the proximity of Lutetia to slow my ship down enough so that I can stay in the vicinity of Lutetia and come in and, let's see, we'll get rid of that stuff entirely. And thankfully, I've done a very fast approach on Lutetia, and we got here in pretty much no time at all. And this is just an asteroid that looks to be around, 100 kilometers across. Don't know if that's the correct size for Lutetia. It sounds a bit large, but it's just a prototype. And that's pretty much the basics of it, is you set a power level and your ship will move at a speed selected by the movement system that depends on your proximity to other objects. The idea is that you just go straight at them and brake towards the end. You do have to control your speed. The ship that we're in is a Corvette. Corvette is the second smallest ship, and it is the second most nimble. If I change to a fighter, which is the most nimble ship, you'll find that if you look at the power setting in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that I can very rapidly, much more rapidly, change my power setting, and that means that this is simply a more nimble ship. And I didn't point it out before, but you'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner that blue bar around the outside of that dial has been changing continuously as I've been approaching and leaving various bodies. And that's an indication of how much disruption my warp drive, my engine drive, is experiencing. And that means that the ship automatically is having its speed reduced. The drive just can't work at full performance when it's in the vicinity of a body that the player would interact with. And then at the other end of the scale are ships like, let's see, we have the fighter, we have the Corvette, the Hunter, the frigate, the destroyer, the cruiser, and the 2-kilometer long battleship, which is an absolute pig. Right now I'm rotating it. It refuses to turn very quickly at all. And if I try to slow this thing down, let's see. If I try and slow this thing down, I'm still trying to rotate it. You can see the forward line there. If I try and slow this thing down, if you look at the power level at the bottom left-hand corner, you can see how slowly it's moving. You do not want to be approaching a planet at 50% power in a battleship because you're never going to be able to slow down in time. So that means that you have to be very gentle with the larger ships. You have to approach things and very gradually. You can leave as quickly as you want, but you have to approach gradually. And that concludes the basics of the warp prototype.